Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Somewhere Between. A lot of interesting developments happening in this episode. For one, well, there's also, obviously, we're picking up where last week's episode left off with the whole, Mimi possibly died. Well, she died, which, the way the ending looked, it looked like someone killed her, but I mean, we really never saw anything. They're just saying she died of it was a heart thing, but then I'm I don't buy that. Obviously it was someone finishing job, but nevertheless, on top of that, we end up, this kind of pushed Laura to decide, because at first, because Nico's if you want to dig into Tom, I mean, this is going to turn your world upside down. I mean, it's not just her world, it's also going to turn Serena's world upside down. She doesn't want to do that to her daughter, so she was going back away. It's hey, you don't got to worry about doing that, because you might see something ugly you don't want to see, something you don't want to know, and besides that, we got a win in our corner with the whole Mimi situation. Immediately find out that she died, so it pushed her to be no, things are still going in motion. We're still closing into that timeline where eventually Serena will die. So it's we got to. We're running out of time anyway. So, but ended up finding out that what the situation is possibly about, at least some corners of it, is the fact is that Tom is having an affair, not just with anybody, freaking Mara, and then all the pieces click. He's the man that, I figured it had to be someone that was married and in a powerful position the way she was acting, and it's who would have thought she'd be sleeping with her best friend's husband? Did not see that coming. But you also see the situation of her kind of spiraling out of control a little bit, showing up at their place, having a gun, because in her mind she's I'm gonna stain his, because the most important person to him isn't just. The most important thing to him isn't just his job and his stunning reputation. It's also Serena, his shining, star in a sense. And she wanted to sully that star by killing herself in front of, so kind of taking away some of Serena's innocence, kind of dull that shining star essentially. Because it's to compensate for her, no longer. I interpret it as oh, she still had the baby and he was pushing for her to have an abortion, but it's no, she already went through. I mean, who knows how far in between it's been, because apparently they've been having this affair for at least a year, because it's oh yeah, ever since Laura had her surgery for whatever, they've been having this affair. So any point in between then that could have happened. So it didn't necessarily even have to be a more recent thing. But I think what really kind of started pushing Mara to the brink was the fact is that Tom probably wanted to end things. Well, the fact is that she's acting the way she is now makes me wonder, is it a more recent thing? But the fact of the matter is Tom was probably wanting to end things, and he tried to end things in this episode, but, they ended up having sex afterwards, so it's it probably just sent mixed messages in her head, and it pissed her off, because she just felt like she was being used and everything. So it's just, when you actually break it down and think about it, it's that's so crazy, and it's sad that things kind of got to that point. But then, you have Laura being yeah, this kind of had to happen in the original timeline, because she had bruises on her arm where Mara had bruises on her arm where Tom touched her like that. So it's even this happened. Once again, it's even in the original, even in the first episode in the original timeline, we never got to see everything. We never got to see what was happening both prior to Serena's death or even the aftermath, because I'm sure everything that happened in aftermath will give us clues about the present day as well, so that's the crazy thing about it. And it's just how much of this actually transpired. Maybe because I think Laura and Mara had a conversation in this timeline where she took notice of asking questions. Maybe that kind of incentivized Mara to kind of, do something like this. Not saying it's, Laura was asking for her or pushed her to do it, but maybe it kind of put the thought in her head of no, there's more to me. I'm not just going to be someone's side girl who will be told to get rid of their child and everything. She was broken essentially. So I'm surprised Laura didn't even throw that in his face later on in the episode when Tom started getting all up in her face and everything. It's I'm surprised you didn't go, yeah, that Mara had a plan of killing herself in front of our daughter, right? This is your fault. So it seems that's tied together, but at the same time, also, it seems that I was wrong about the envelope from last episode. I was thinking, oh, it's Grace's envelope, but it turns out it's a blackmailer. It's someone else entirely. So then it's okay, because then Laura gets kidnapped. Nico shows up. It turns out everything's connected. The person who kidnapped her is the same person that has a thorn tattoo on her wrist, who is the same person who killed Debray, who's also the one that took Serena, because Serena had a picture of that tattoo in her pocket when they found her body. So it's like everything is connected. So it's like, what does Tom's affair have to do with all this situation? Not unless the blackmailer situation might be something. No, because it was dropped off by the person in a bike helmet, so it's definitely all connected. I was about to say not unless the blackmailer is a different person, because like they were told to kind of back down. It's like, so why are you telling us to back down? If this was simply about some affair or something like that, like I'm trying to like, where do all the pieces line up in all of this? Because you also have, I mean, obviously Ruby and Serena kind of sneak off and get inside Vivica, you know, Jesse's wives, you know, I mean, Jesse and Vivica's place. And there, Nico ends up finding a picture. That picture has a tag, like everyone has Susanna, which I will real quickly add, I completely misinterpret things. Like, I thought Danny was Susanna's, like, husband or fiance. I thought they were together, and that her and Nico had a thing either before or maybe they had an affair in between. Like, I completely misunderstood this. They were engaged. Completely got that wrong. But you see that Jesse and Susanna knew each other, and the fact is that there's 3 other people in the picture, and they all have the same tattoo. So that kind of begs the question of like, so are they all connected? Like, is it one of them who's the bike person, or is it just like, are all 3 of them involved? Because whatever this thing is, there's a lot more to it than that. Because it seems like, even with this whole situation of like Tom talking to the person on the phone, he's like, it seems like he's getting something out of this. It doesn't seem like he's necessarily being blackmailed. It seems like what I'm thinking is Tom is being welcomed to the big boys table in some big, like, thing, whatever it is, some big cover up, some kind of conspiracy thing. He's being welcomed into the big leagues, and everything he's been doing, like taking pictures, all the evidence he's covered up, the whole Susanna scarf situation, which, you know, might be leading Nico down a path of finding out the truth. Because I mean, the conversation still doesn't come up about, you know, what Grace has found, what she said she found at Tom. So I mean, there's already a wedge between Laura and Tom. Side note, I already kind of called the Nico and her thing obviously, but it's like, did not expect that whole her and Tom falling out thing. I wasn't expecting to like way into the season, but it's like, no, like it's definitely happening now. I mean, there's so many levels to this, because you also see that Nico's cop friend, he's in on this too, because he finds the glove that Nico said, like, oh yeah, it's got the guy's DNA and stuff on it. I mean, blood on it, and he burns it at the end of the episode. So no telling like how far this is, like what this is all about, like what is this all covering up. I mean, like it stems from these murders to Susanna's murder. Like all of this is connected, and it's like, you know, because another thing we ended up learning too is that Nico only testified against Danny because Tom promised that the death penalty wouldn't be on the plate, wouldn't even be on the table, you know, because, you know, he probably wouldn't have gone through if he knew it meant going through with his brother's death. It's like, also because it's like, it's the woman he loves. Like at the end of the day, like I think on some level, you know, he still thinks, you know, his brother did it, which we know, you know, which obviously there's obviously more to it. So I'm sure there's a lot more complexity to it. So it's like, I mean, what exactly went down? And because we do know that these people with tattoos are definitely involved in everything. So it's like, maybe they had something to do with Susanna's death, or maybe they helped cover it up, whatever the case may be. It's like, what does everything have to do with each other, you know? Can't quite get the pieces to fit together yet. But things are definitely going to get bad for Tom going forward, considering the fact that he doesn't have the rings anymore, because Serena got them because she wanted to take a picture that she had in her time capsule to give to Vivica, which did, like, that's what it's crazy about the whole situation. It's like, how much of this all happened in the original timeline and what's new? And I think the fact is that they're showing everything makes you realize that no, like, it's all new. Like, or maybe they are showing you this now, and rather than show you before, they're going to show you now. I don't know. Maybe, because that's the question of like, things might be a little differently, but things will always play out the same way. At least that's what the show's kind of like showing you, that even when you try to change time, like when they tried to save the victims, all of them ended up dead anyway, like Mimi, for example. So like fate has its way of kind of course correcting in a sense. So how much of this is new and how much of this already happened, but slight changes and variations. Like, obviously, like in the original timeline, there was no problem between Laura and Tom because of this. No one knew of this situation, and maybe that's what led to Tom. Once again, maybe that played a role in it too, like him leaving Laura. Like, well, I mean, like the whole like not wanting to be in a house thing, like being devastated because Serena's gone, and just I don't know, like how much stuff influences each other. It's like what happened after all that. Like it seemed like Tom and Laura still stayed together, but they just probably weren't on talking terms or whatever. So it's like, did he eventually? I mean, that was literally within the same day that she tried to kill herself. So it was like made you wonder, like, was there the whole him and Mara thing still going on? But as we know, like they kind of broke it off, which maybe that's what that phone call was about when Serena got taken. Mara was kind of getting to the phone. So something that did pop up in my mind too. I don't know if there's any validity to it. I was wondering, because I was starting to think, could the person with the thorn be Barry or something? And I was like, no, because Barry, I think they would have noticed Barry had a tattoo like that. But I'm like, I don't know, man. I feel like the thing is, you can't trust anyone in this series, as we've learned just now. Like, it's like, I was wondering what that whole situation would have to do with all of this, like Mara's situation. But it's like, as you can see, it's connected. So I don't know. I mean, what is this all for? What are those rings and what is a scarf? Like, what does that all get Tom? Like I said, I think it's some bigger position, but into what? Is it some kind of like, obviously some super big corrupt system that maybe Tom's been a part of ever since the Suzanne, like the trial that put Danny on death row. The whole Susanna situation, and maybe he's been trying to slowly work his way into position, but like they wouldn't really give him any leeway. But now he's got the leverage he needs to kind of get in a higher position or something. Because it's like once they're like, okay, Tom, yeah, and he's like, yes, and he's getting all excited. So there's something going on there. Just not sure exactly what. It's also kind of interesting too that obviously, like as I brought up earlier, we see that this whole thing is connected to Jesse to a certain extent. And the fact of the matter is of how closely tied all of these worlds were. Like, for example, like it didn't seem like Nico knew that Susanna knew Jesse. But at the same time, it's like, I was wondering what the significance of his like car crash was. And I mean, like, maybe I pointed this out before when it kind of came up before. I was like, all right, I think I brought that up before. Like, what I'm trying to say is maybe it wasn't an accident, him dying. Maybe there's a lot more to that. Especially with all these like circumstances, like because it was like, why? Once again, everything is important whether you realize it or not. Jesse's whole like death obviously played a role in letting them figure all of this out. So, but maybe it's not just that. Obviously, going back to it, the whole connection with Susanna as well as the others who one, if not all three, are potential killers in this whole situation. And there was also this line from Tom in the episode when like Laura was just kind of like about to leave with like Nico, and you have like Tom being like, no, you're not gonna leave with him. She's like, basically he was like, you really are just like your mother. And she's like, if I was like my mother, you'd be bleeding from your crotch right now. Which is kind of an interesting thing that he kind of would say that. I mean, we've never actually been introduced to their outside family. Is that something we're going to be? I mean, like the outside family hasn't come up like that. Never came up during the original like timeline. So I mean, not unless it's one of those situations of like it's known but it's never really going to be really tackled. Like what I mean is like her mom like being brought up in a conversation in the story but never actually being shown or actually brought up, I guess mainly because this is a very confined story, so they're not trying to go too far outside of like the main characters and everything. But it does beg the question of like, what does that really mean? Like, is that something we'll kind of find out going forward about what he meant by that? Or is that just kind of like a one-off line of like, so you're trying to imply that her mom's crazy or something like that? I don't know. Like I said, very interesting developments. I'm so curious to see how this all plays out going forward in the next episode, especially for Tom. Now that he knows that the rings are gone, but he's making all these promises to hand them over. And plus, they're going to visit Susanna's dad, who did the tattoos. Which I'm very curious to see what his relationship is like with Nico. Because Nico and Susanna were engaged, sure, but it was still his brother that killed, quote unquote, Danny killed, Susanna. So it's kind of like, I don't know if that's awkward or not. I don't know whether him and Susanna's dad have ever kept really in touch or not. So we will just have to wait till the next episode to see. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.